Ethan Cole was ready to leave the alien marketplace. The sun of this strange planet was dipping low, casting long purple shadows across the dusty streets. He had just finished selling his mechanical parts to a group of traders and was packing his tools back into his hover cart. The air smelled of spice, metal, and oil. He was thinking about heading back to his ship when he felt a gentle tug at his sleeve. He looked down and saw a small alien girl staring up at him. Her skin was a pale lavender, and her big silver eyes seemed too large for her small face. She looked about 8 years old in human terms, wearing a simple dress with frayed edges. She clutched the hem of his jacket as if she was afraid he would vanish. "You must marry my mom, human. She's really kind," she said. Ethan blinked, certain he'd misheard her. "What?" The girl didn't smile, didn't laugh. Her voice trembled as she repeated, "Please, marry my mom." It was so strange and sudden that Ethan let out a small laugh. "Kid, I think you've got the wrong person." Her grip on his sleeve tightened. "No, I saw you. You're strong. You're kind. You can help her." Ethan crouched down so his eyes met hers. "Why would you want me to marry your mom? You don't even know me." The girl's lips quivered, and for the first time he noticed how scared she looked. "If you don't, they'll take her tonight. And me." Ethan felt his smile fade. "Who will?" She glanced over her shoulder, and Ethan followed her gaze. At the far end of the marketplace, 2 large figures stood half hidden between stalls. Both wore dark armor with sharp edges that reflected the fading light. Their helmets were shaped like snarling beasts, and even from here, Ethan could feel their eyes on them. The girl stepped closer and whispered, "They work for the one who wants her. If he gets her, he gets me too. Please." Ethan straightened, uneasy now. "This isn't something I can just—" "Please," she interrupted, her voice cracking. "If you marry her, they can't take us. That's the law." Ethan shook his head slightly, unsure whether this was some kind of scam or a real cry for help. The girl's fear looked genuine, but her request was insane. Marriage? To a stranger? On an alien world? Before he could speak again, one of the armored figures began walking toward them, the other following close behind. The crowd in the marketplace seemed to thin as the guards approached, as if everyone knew trouble was coming and wanted no part of it. The girl's hand slipped into his, small and trembling. "Please decide now, before they reach us." Ethan's instincts told him to walk away. This wasn't his fight. But there was something about the way she looked up at him, her eyes wide, her voice breaking, that made him pause. The armored figures were only a few steps away now. One of them stopped in front of Ethan, towering over him. "This one yours, human?" the guard asked, his voice deep and mechanical through the helmet. Ethan looked down at the girl. Her grip tightened. He could feel her pulse racing through her small hand. "She's just a kid," Ethan said. The guard tilted his head slightly. "She belongs to Lord Vorak's bride. All property of the bride belongs to him. By nightfall, she will be claimed." Ethan felt a cold anger rise in his chest. "She's not property." The guard gave a slow, almost mocking chuckle. "Everything is property, human. You would do well to remember that." The other guard took a step forward. "If you are not her blood or her bonded, you have no rights over her. Move aside." The girl's voice came out in a whisper, meant only for Ethan. "If you say yes now, they can't take us." Ethan glanced between her and the guards. His mind raced. He didn't know her, didn't know her mother, Atta, didn't even know the laws here. But he did know one thing. He hated seeing someone small and helpless being taken by force. The first guard reached out to grab the girl's arm. Ethan stepped forward, blocking the path. "She's under my protection," he said, his voice steady. The guard stopped, surprised at his defiance. "By what claim?" one asked. Ethan looked down at the girl, then back at them. "She's family." The girl's eyes widened. "Then you'll come?" she whispered. Ethan gave the faintest nod. "Take me to your mom." The guard stood silent for a moment, then stepped aside slowly, as if letting him dig his own grave. Ethan could feel their stares burning into his back as the girl pulled him into the winding, narrow alleys beyond the market. He didn't know where this would lead or what kind of trouble he had just stepped into, but every step away from those armored monsters felt like the right choice, at least for now. When they turned a corner and the marketplace sounds faded behind them, Ethan asked, "What's your name?" "Sorry," she replied, "and my mom's name is Lyra." "All right, sorry," he said, glancing back once more to see if they were being followed. "Let's go meet your mom. Sari gripped his hand tighter. We have to hurry. They'll come after us. Somewhere in the shadows behind them, soft metallic footsteps echoed faintly, following at a steady, patient pace. The narrow streets twisted like a maze, lit only by the dim glow of hanging lanterns. Ethan followed Sari closely, her small hand pulling him forward with surprising urgency. The further they went, the quieter the world became. The loud calls of traders and the clatter of the marketplace faded until all that remained were the faint hums of distant machinery and the occasional hiss of steam from the old pipes along the walls. Sari's pace quickened. We're almost there, she whispered, glancing back over her shoulder, as if afraid the armored guards might step out of the shadows at any moment. Finally, she stopped in front of a small house pressed between two taller, crumbling buildings. Its door was made of old metal patched with wooden boards, and the faint light from inside leaked through the cracks. She knocked 3 times in a quick pattern, then waited. A moment later, the door opened a little, and a tall alien woman appeared. Her skin was the same pale lavender as Sari's, but her features were sharper, more refined. Long strands of silvery hair framed her face, and her deep green eyes were striking even in the dim light. She looked at Sari with relief. Then her gaze shifted to Ethan, instantly cautious. Sari, who is this? The woman asked. Before the girl could answer, Ethan stepped back politely. I'm Ethan Cole. Your daughter found me in the marketplace. She, said you needed help. The woman's expression hardened slightly. Help? What kind of help? Sari moved between them, her small voice urgent. Mom, I told him you have to marry him. Ethan rubbed the back of his neck, feeling awkward under the woman's piercing stare. Yeah, about that. She said it's the only way to keep you both safe. Something about someone trying to claim you? The woman sighed, her shoulders sagging. She opened the door wider. Come inside. Quickly. Ethan stepped into a narrow room lit by a single hanging lamp. The air smelled faintly of herbs and warm bread. A small table with 2 chairs stood in the corner, and against the wall was a low bed covered with a thin blanket. It was humble but clean. The woman closed the door and turned to face him. My name is Lyra, and yes, what Sari told you is true, but it's not as simple as she makes it sound. Sari crossed her arms. It's simple. If you marry her, Vorak can't take her. Or me. Lyra gave her daughter a warning glance. Sorry. She looked back at Ethan. Lord Vorak is a powerful noble here. I owe him a debt, and he intends to collect it tonight. He's not interested in repaying money. He wants ownership. If I agree to his proposal, Sari becomes his property too. Ethan frowned. That's not a proposal. That's slavery. In this city, Lyra said quietly, it's perfectly legal. And the law says if I'm already bonded, married, Vorak's claim is void. But marrying a human? She hesitated. It would cause trouble for you. Humans aren't exactly respected here. You'd be marked as an enemy of the noble houses. Sari's voice trembled. But he's the only one who can help. Ethan looked at the girl, then at her mother. So you're telling me that if I just say yes, he can't take you or your daughter? Yes, Lyra replied, but it's not that easy. He'll challenge it. He'll demand proof. And men like him don't stop just because the law tells them to. Ethan thought back to the armored guards in the marketplace. Their voices, their threats, their complete lack of mercy. He'd seen enough men like that in his life. Different worlds, same cruelty. What happens if I say no? He asked. Lyra's lips tightened. Then he comes here tonight, and neither of us will have a choice. The weight of her words filled the small room. Sari stood close to her mother, eyes wide with fear. Ethan could see how much they depended on each other, how much they wanted to keep each other safe. He exhaled slowly. I'm not the type to walk away from people in trouble. Before Lyra could respond, a sharp knock rattled the door. 3 loud, deliberate bangs. The same pattern Sari had used, but slower, heavier. Sari froze. It's them. Lyra moved quickly to the door but didn't open it. A deep voice called from outside. Lyra, open the door. Lord Vorak sends his regards. Ethan stepped closer, his muscles tensing. Is there another way out? No, Lyra whispered. The knocking grew louder. Do not make us break it down. Lyra turned to Ethan. You should leave now. This isn't your fight. Ethan shook his head. I think it is now. The metal door shook as a fist slammed against it again. Sari gripped her mother's arm tightly. Lyra looked between Ethan and the door, a storm of fear and defiance in her eyes. A final heavy bang echoed through the room, and a deep voice growled, "Last chance, Lyra. Open it, or we come in." The metal door swung open with a loud creak, and two armored guards stepped inside. Their armor was black and polished, with sharp edges that caught the dim light, and their helmets hid their faces completely. Between them entered a tall alien noble draped in dark crimson robes. His presence filled the small room like a shadow, and his cold, predatory eyes fixed on Lyra. "Lyra," he said slowly, his voice deep and smooth like a blade sliding from its sheath. "I have come for you, as agreed." Lyra straightened her back, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "There was no agreement, Vorak, only your threats." Vorak's lips curved into a slow smile. "Call them what you wish. The law is on my side. By tonight, you and the child are mine." Ethan stepped forward, putting himself between Lyra and Vorak. "Not going to happen." The noble's gaze slid to him with open disgust. "And what are you? A stray human traitor? You dare stand in my way?" Ethan kept his voice calm. "I'm someone who doesn't like bullies." The guards shifted their stance, their hands resting on the hilts of their weapons. Vorak took a step closer, towering over Ethan. "If you are not her blood, or her bonded, you have no voice here." Ethan looked back at Lyra briefly, then returned his eyes to Vorak. "She's already taken. By me." For a moment, silence filled the room. Even Sari's breath caught. Lyra's eyes widened, but she said nothing. Vorak's smile faded. "A claim of bonding with a human?" He laughed once, short and sharp. "How pathetic. But the law is the law. It demands proof. You will present yourselves at the Grand Hall tomorrow in front of the witnesses. There, you will prove this union or forfeit your lives." Ethan didn't flinch. "Fine, we'll be there." Vorak's gaze darkened, but his voice remained smooth. "Good. I will enjoy tearing apart this little lie, too. When the council sees the truth, I will take what is mine, and you." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper, "will not live to see another sunrise." He turned sharply and walked out, his guards following. One of them paused at the door, staring at Ethan through the narrow slit of his helmet. "Enjoy your last night, human," the guard said before stepping into the street. The moment they were gone, Lyra turned to Ethan, her voice sharp. "What have you done?" "I just bought you a little time," he replied. "You don't understand," she said, pacing the small room. "The Grand Hall is no place for you. Vorak will twist the law against you. He will demand the trials, and you are not trained for them. He'll make sure you fail, if you survive at all." Ethan shrugged lightly. "I've handled worse." Lyra stopped pacing, her eyes hard. "You think this is some adventure? This will cost you your life." "Maybe," Ethan said quietly, "but it'll save yours." Sari ran to him suddenly, wrapping her arms around his waist. "I knew you'd help," she said softly, her voice shaking. Lyra watched the scene, torn between fear and gratitude. She didn't trust this human, not fully, but part of her couldn't ignore the way he had stood in front of them, unshaken, when even her own people would have looked away. "Tomorrow," she said finally, "when we go to the Grand Hall, Vorak will make his move. He'll push for the trial of bonds. It's dangerous. If you want to walk away, do it now." Ethan shook his head. Too late for that. Outside, faint footsteps echoed away down the street, the sound of Vorak's men leaving. But Ethan had a feeling they wouldn't stay gone for long. Night fell quickly over the city. The streets outside grew quiet, except for the occasional rumble of passing patrols. Inside the little home, Lyra prepared a small meal from the few supplies she had. Ethan sat at the table, turning over the events in his mind. When they ate, the tension in the air never faded. Sari tried to talk about small things, her favorite fruit, a story from school, but Lyra kept glancing at the door, and Ethan kept watching the windows. After the meal, Lyra finally spoke again. "If we do this, if we convince them we're bonded, your life changes forever. You'll be marked as someone who defied a noble. You may never trade here again. You might be hunted." Ethan met her gaze. "I'll take my chances." Sari smiled faintly and leaned against him. "Then you're my dad now." The words caught Ethan off guard. He didn't know what to say, so he just gave her a small nod. The night stretched on, filled with silence and unspoken thoughts. Somewhere outside, the sound of heavy boots echoed again. Too close this time. Ethan moved to the window, peeking through the curtain. Two figures stood under the streetlight, watching the house. "They're not going to wait until tomorrow," he muttered. Lyra's face tightened. "Then we need to be ready." Ethan's hand moved to the small pistol at his belt. The glow of the streetlight flickered, and the shadows outside seemed to grow longer, creeping closer to the door. The night passed without sleep. Every small noise outside made Lyra glance at the door and Ethan reach for his weapon. Sari eventually drifted off on the bed, curled under the thin blanket, but even in sleep, she kept one hand gripping her mother's dress. By the first light of dawn, the street outside was quiet. The two shadowy figures from the night before had disappeared, but Ethan knew it didn't mean they were safe. Vorak's men weren't the type to give up. They were just waiting for the right moment. Lyra stood by the small table, her arms folded. "Ethan, this is your last chance to walk away. If you step into that grand hall with me, there's no turning back." Ethan adjusted the strap of his jacket. "I'm not walking away." Her eyes searched his face for hesitation, but found none. "Do you even know what the trial of bonds is?" "Not really," he admitted. She sighed, pacing slowly. "It's an ancient custom. If someone challenges a claimed bond, the suitor, meaning you, must prove their worth in front of the council. Vorak will choose the trial. It can be a test of strength, skill, or courage. Sometimes all three. He'll make sure it's something impossible for a human." Ethan shrugged lightly. "Then I'll just have to surprise him." Lyra shook her head. "You don't understand the risks. If you fail, they don't just end the bond. They kill you. And without you, Vorak will take us instantly." Ethan's voice was calm, but his eyes were steady. "That's why I can't fail." Before she could reply, the sound of boots echoed in the street. Heavy, slow, and in perfect rhythm. Lyra went to the window and peeked through the curtain. A squad of Vorak's guards was approaching, their black armor glinting in the early light. At their head was a tall alien in ceremonial robes, one of Vorak's heralds. The knock on the door was sharp and commanding. "By order of Lord Vorak, the claimed bondmates are summoned to the Grand Hall for judgment." Sari stirred awake, rubbing her eyes. "Is it time?" she asked sleepily. Lyra hesitated, then forced a small smile. "Yes, it's time." Ethan opened the door, facing the guards without flinching. The herald looked him up and down with open disdain. "Follow. Try to keep up, human." They stepped out into the street, surrounded on all sides by armored soldiers. As they walked, locals peeked from doorways and windows, whispering among themselves. Some looked curious, others pitying, and a few quickly turned away, unwilling to be seen watching. The grand hall loomed ahead, its towering stone walls carved with alien symbols and figures of past rulers. A massive set of doors stood open, revealing a wide chamber inside. The ceiling was high, with banners of deep blue and gold hanging down. Rows of alien nobles sat on either side, their clothing rich and colorful, their eyes sharp and judgmental. At the far end of the hall, Vorak sat on a raised platform, draped in ceremonial armor, his crimson robes flowing around him. A smirk curled his lips as he watched them approach. "Ah, the human arrives," Vorak said loudly, his voice carrying across the hall. "And the lady he pretends to claim." Ethan ignored him, walking forward until he and Lyra stood in the center of the hall. One of the council members, an elderly alien with silver markings across his forehead, raised a hand. "State your claim, human." Ethan's voice was steady. "I claim Lyra as my bonded. By the laws of this city, Vorak has no right to her or her child." The council murmured among themselves, glancing toward Vorak. The noble rose from his seat. "The claim is laughable. A human and one of our kind? Impossible. I demand the trial of bonds to prove this so-called union." The elder nodded slowly. "The challenger may choose the trial." Vorak's smile widened. "Then I choose the razor bridge." A low murmur swept through the hall. Lyra's face paled. Ethan glanced at her, silently asking what it was. "It's a suspended bridge over the death pit," she whispered quickly. 100 meters above the ground. The planks are weak, and below are creatures, winged hunters that can snatch you midair. Vorak gestured toward a side door. "We begin now." The crowd followed as the guards led them out into the open air, toward a massive chasm just beyond the hall. The razor bridge stretched across it, swaying slightly in the wind. The wood looked old, some planks missing entirely. Far below, in the shadows, faint glowing shapes moved, circling slowly. The herald stepped forward. "The trial is simple. Cross the bridge to the other side, then return. Fall, and you will not rise again." Ethan stepped onto the first plank, feeling it bend under his weight. The wind rushed past his ears, carrying the faint screeches of whatever waited below. Halfway across, one of the ropes snapped suddenly with a sharp twang, sending the bridge tilting sideways. The crowd gasped. Ethan grabbed the side rope, holding on as the bridge swung violently. From below, the glowing shapes began rising, wings unfolding in the shadows. Lyra's voice called from the edge, "Ethan, don't look down." But the screeches grew louder, and the first of the winged predators burst upward toward him, its mouth wide, rows of teeth glinting in the sun. The bridge swayed wildly as the first winged predator shot toward Ethan, its leathery wings cutting through the air with a deep, fast beat. Its eyes glowed a sickly yellow, locked on his throat. Ethan swung his body sideways, using the momentum of the swinging bridge to let the creature pass him by. Its claws scraped against the rope, sending loose fibers fluttering into the abyss. The crowd on the far side gasped. Vorak leaned forward, his smirk replaced with a glint of irritation. Lyra stood at the edge, gripping Sari's shoulders tightly, whispering prayers under her breath. Another plank cracked under Ethan's boots, splitting clean in two. He dropped to his knees, grabbing the side rope just in time before his leg could slip through the gap. The wind howled through the chasm, carrying the screeches of more predators rising from below. Ethan scanned the bridge. Half the planks ahead were broken or missing. He couldn't walk across them, not normally. He took a deep breath, then shifted his weight and began leaping from plank to plank, his boots hitting wood for barely a second before pushing off again. The bridge swung violently with every jump. A predator swooped in from the left. Ethan ducked low, pulling himself under the side rope, letting the creature overshoot him. But it circled back instantly, faster this time. Ethan waited until the last moment, then kicked at its head as it dove. His boot connected hard, sending the predator tumbling backward into the abyss. The crowd roared with surprise. He reached the far side of the bridge, grabbing the post to steady himself. The guards there looked stunned that he had made it across. But the trial wasn't over. He still had to return. Ethan stepped back onto the bridge, his movements faster now. The predators were angry, their screeches sharper, one dove low from behind, aiming for his back. Ethan didn't turn. He dropped flat to the planks, letting it pass overhead, then rolled to his feet without breaking stride. The ropes creaked dangerously. The earlier damage had weakened the bridge, and one of the main side ropes began to unravel. The whole structure tilted toward the chasm. Ethan grabbed the remaining rope and pulled himself upward, balancing on the edge like a tightrope walker. Gasps filled the air as he took careful, fast steps along the rope itself, using his arms for balance. Below him, the predators circled impatiently, snapping their jaws at the air. The final few meters felt endless, but at last, Ethan leapt from the rope onto the solid ground. The crowd erupted in loud cheers and shouts of disbelief. Even some of the nobles exchanged glances of surprise. Vorak's jaw tightened. He stood slowly, clapping his hands in slow, mocking applause. Impressive for a human. His voice carried across the chasm. But the trial of bonds is not over. The second bond must still be tested, your ability to protect. The council elder nodded reluctantly. Very well. The second bond shall be tested now. Before Ethan could even respond, Vorak gave a signal with his hand. 3 of his armored guards moved toward Lyra and Sari. Without warning, they lunged forward, drawing short curved blades. Lyra pushed Sari behind her, but the guards closed in too fast. Ethan didn't hesitate. He broke into a sprint, covering the distance in seconds. His shoulder slammed into the first guard, knocking him sideways into the dirt. The second guard swung his blade down toward Lyra, but Ethan caught his wrist mid-swing, twisting hard until the blade clattered to the ground. The third guard tried to grab Sari, but Ethan grabbed him by the collar and yanked him backward, delivering a sharp elbow to his helmet. The guard staggered, and Ethan followed with a kick to his chest, sending him crashing to the ground. The crowd buzzed with shock. Even the council members leaned forward, whispering to each other. Vorak's eyes narrowed into slits. So, you can fight, but can you fight me? He stepped down from the platform, removing his crimson robe to reveal ornate armor beneath. From his side, he drew a curved energy blade, the weapon humming with deadly light. The council elder frowned. Vorak, this is unnecessary. On the contrary, Vorak said, never taking his eyes off Ethan. The final proof of a bond is the willingness to risk your life against all odds. Ethan picked up one of the fallen guard's weapons, a plain metal staff. He spun it in his hands, testing the weight. Fine, let's end this. The two men circled each other in the center of the hall, the crowd pressing closer. Vorak struck first, his blade flashing toward Ethan's chest. Ethan sidestepped, using the staff to deflect the blow. The force of the strike sent vibrations up his arms, but he held his ground. Vorak attacked again and again, each swing faster and heavier than the last. Ethan blocked, ducked, and dodged, never letting the blade touch him. He waited, watching for an opening. Then he saw it. Vorak overextended on a downward slash. Ethan stepped in, swinging the staff hard against his opponent's wrist. The blade clattered to the ground. In one smooth motion, Ethan swept Vorak's legs out from under him, sending the noble crashing onto his back. Ethan planted the end of the staff at Vorak's throat. The hall went silent, except for the noble's heavy breathing. "I could finish this," Ethan said, his voice calm but firm. "But I'm not like you." He stepped back, letting Vorak rise, humiliated. The council elder stood. "The bond is proven. By the law, Vorak has no claim over Lyra or her child." The hall erupted in mixed cheers and angry shouts. Lyra rushed forward, her eyes wide with relief, and Sari threw her arms around Ethan's waist. But Vorak's eyes burned with hate as he stood. His voice was low, almost a growl. "This isn't over, human." The hall was still buzzing with voices when Vorak slowly stood, brushing the dust from his armor. His eyes locked on Ethan, a cold smile forming on his lips. "The council may protect you today," he said, his voice carrying across the chamber, "but the law is not the only power in this city." Ethan kept his stance relaxed, but didn't take his eyes off the noble. "You lost, Vorak. Walk away." Vorak's smile widened, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Oh, I will walk away. For now. But accidents happen. Markets burn. Stray bolts find their way into hearts. When you least expect it, human, you will regret standing in my path." The council elder slammed his staff against the floor, the sound echoing. "Enough. The trial is over. The bond is recognized. This session is closed." Vorak gave a shallow bow to the council, then turned sharply and strode out, his guards trailing him like shadows. Ethan watched him leave, knowing that the noble's threats weren't empty. Lyra approached slowly, her face tense but her eyes bright with relief. "You didn't have to fight for us," she said quietly. "But you did, and you won." Sari didn't bother with words. She ran straight to Ethan and hugged him tightly. "I knew you could do it," she said into his jacket. Ethan placed a hand on her head. "I told you I'd keep you safe." But his thoughts were already on what Vorak might do next. Winning in the Grand Hall had humiliated the noble in front of the most powerful people in the city. A man like that wouldn't let the insult go. The crowd began to disperse, and the guards who had been watching them so closely now kept their distance. The council elder stepped forward, his silver markings catching the light. "You've made powerful enemies, human," he warned. "Vorak has influence beyond these walls. You'd be wise to leave the city before he strikes again." Ethan glanced at Lyra and Sari. "And if I go, what happens to them?" The elder hesitated. "The bond protects them in the eyes of the law, but not in the shadows." Ethan nodded slowly. "Then I guess we won't be leaving one at a time. We'll all leave together." They left the hall under the watchful eyes of the nobles. The streets outside were quieter than before, but there was a heaviness in the air, as if the city itself was holding its breath. Back at Lyra's small home, she closed the door and leaned against it, her shoulders finally relaxing. "You shouldn't have made that promise in front of the council," she said. "Leaving the city won't be easy. Vorak will block the gates if he suspects we're going." "Then we don't use the gates," Ethan replied. "We find another way." Sari sat at the table, swinging her legs nervously. "Is Vorak going to come here?" Ethan crouched in front of her. "Maybe, but if he does, he'll have to get through me first." The girl's fear eased a little, and she managed a small smile. As night fell, Ethan worked on his hover cart in the corner, adjusting its engine for speed. He had a plan forming, but it would mean moving before dawn. Lyra prepared a small meal, but neither of them had much appetite. Every creak of the floorboards, every sound from the street made them tense. Around midnight, the faint sound of footsteps came from outside, slow, deliberate, and too many to be a passerby. Ethan silently reached for his pistol and motioned for Lyra to take Sari into the back room. The footsteps stopped right outside the door. A low, mocking voice spoke through the metal. "Enjoying your victory, human?" It was Vorak. Ethan said nothing. "You think the council can protect you forever? The night has no council, no witnesses. Step outside and let's see how long you last." Ethan's hand tightened on his weapon, but he didn't move. The door shook once under a heavy knock, then silence. Minutes passed before he dared open the curtain. The street was empty. Vorak hadn't come to fight. He'd come to remind them he could appear at any moment. Lyra stepped out from the back room, her face pale. "He's not going to stop, is he?" Ethan shook his head. "No, that's why we leave at first light." The rest of the night passed in uneasy quiet. When dawn finally came, Ethan loaded what little they had onto the hover cart. Sari held a small bag of her belongings, left clutching it like a lifeline. They slipped out of the city through the narrow industrial district, where old cargo tunnels ran under the outer wall. Lyra led the way. She had used these tunnels once long ago when her people still traded beyond the city. Halfway through the tunnel, the sound of boots echoed behind them. Vorak's voice called out, closer than Ethan expected. "Running already? I expected more fight from you, human." Ethan pushed Lyra and Sari ahead. "Go. Don't stop." The tunnel ahead was dark, and the exit was still far, but Ethan didn't look back. He could hear the nobles' guards following, their armor clanging in the narrow space. The hunt had begun. The tunnel was cold and narrow, the walls damp with dripping water. Ethan's boots splashed through shallow puddles as he pushed Lyra and Sari ahead of him. The dim light from the opening far ahead looked small and far away, but it was their only chance. Behind them, the sound of boots on stone grew louder. Vorak's guards were closing in. "Faster," Ethan urged. His voice was low but firm. Lyra gripped Sari's hand tightly as they ran, her long strides slowing only enough to keep her daughter close. Ethan kept glancing back, his pistol ready. The tunnel's narrow walls would make it hard for the guards to surround them, but it also meant there was no room to dodge if they fired first. A shout echoed through the tunnel. "Stop them!" It was Vorak's voice, deep and furious. Shadows stretched along the walls as the guards' lights drew nearer. Ethan cursed under his breath. They were gaining too quickly. He spotted an old metal pipe running along the side of the tunnel and, without hesitation, smashed it with the butt of his pistol. Steam hissed out in a blinding cloud, filling the tunnel between them and the pursuers. The sudden wall of white mist slowed the guards, but Ethan knew it wouldn't stop them for long. "Keep moving," he said, pushing Lyra forward. The light at the tunnel's end grew larger. They could hear the faint hum of machinery from the outside world, the promise of open air. But just as they neared the exit, two figures stepped into view, more of Vorak's men, blocking the way. Ethan's pace didn't slow. "Stay behind me." The first guard lunged, swinging a short blade. Ethan sidestepped and struck him hard across the helmet with his pistol grip. The second guard aimed a shock baton at Ethan's ribs, but Ethan grabbed the weapon's shaft, twisting it until the guard lost his grip, then shoved him into the wall. "Go, now!" Ethan barked. Lyra pulled Sari past the fallen guards and into the open. The early morning air was cold and sharp, carrying the scent of rust and fuel from the nearby loading docks. Ethan followed them out, scanning the area for threats. The docks were nearly empty, only a few cargo haulers parked near the edge. In the distance, the river shimmered faintly under the rising sun. Ethan spotted a small transport skiff tied to one of the docks. "That's our way out." They ran toward it, but a loud metallic clang behind them made Ethan turn. Vorak himself had emerged from the tunnel, his armor gleaming, his face twisted with rage. "You can't run from me, human!" he shouted, drawing his curved energy blade. Ethan stepped away from the skiff, moving to intercept him. "Get in the boat," he told Lyra without looking back. Vorak closed the distance quickly, swinging the blade in a wide arc. Ethan blocked with a metal bar he'd grabbed from the dock, the impact sending vibrations up his arms. Vorak struck again, his blows heavy and relentless, each one meant to kill. "You humiliated me in the Grand Hall," Vorak snarled. "Now I'll take my time ending you." Ethan gritted his teeth, deflecting strike after strike. Vorak was stronger, but Ethan was faster, using his speed to avoid direct hits. He waited for the noble to overcommit, just like before. When Vorak raised his blade for a high slash, Ethan stepped in close, ramming the metal bar into his opponent's side. The hit made Vorak stumble, and Ethan followed with a kick to his chest, sending him back toward the dock's edge. Vorak roared in fury and charged again, but Ethan sidestepped at the last second, hooking the bar behind Vorak's leg. The noble's momentum carried him forward, and he crashed into the water with a loud splash. Ethan didn't wait to see if he would resurface. He sprinted to the skiff, untied it, and jumped in. Lyra was already at the controls, her hands trembling but determined. "Go!" Ethan said. The small craft's engine roared to life, and they sped away from the dock. The river current caught them, carrying them swiftly downstream. Ethan kept his eyes on the shore, watching for any sign of pursuit. Sari sat between them, clutching her mother's arm tightly. "Did we make it?" she asked. Ethan glanced at Lyra, then back at the receding city. "We've still got a long way to go, but for now, yes." The sun climbed higher, casting golden light over the water. The city walls faded into the distance, and with them, the shadow of Vorak's reach. Lyra's voice was quiet but steady. "You didn't just save us, Ethan. You gave us a future." Ethan looked at her, then at Sari, whose silver eyes no longer held fear but something brighter. "Hope. Guess that makes me part of the family now," he said with a faint smile. Sari grinned for the first time in days. "Told you she's really kind." The skiff cut through the water, leaving the city and its dangers behind. But in Ethan's mind, one thought stayed clear. Vorak would not forget this. And someday, the fight might come again. But when it did, Ethan would be ready.